Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Baruch Hashem, starting a new parak, a new Masechta, a new Seder. We're starting with the very beginning of Maseches, Yevamos, Daf Beis. For those of you who didn't get one, we're going to have a sheet handed out here. Oh, I didn't send one to you guys. Sorry. For you, Dad. Avi, to you and my father, if you don't mind.
I do not mind.
Thank you very much. So what we're going to be doing over here is reading some psukim from Chumash. And these psukim from Chumash will give us a brief background into the mitzvah of Yibum and or Chalitza. This will be the starting point. And it almost gave me comfort in a way that after having seen the psukim, I'm like, okay, fine. I understand that there's a basic din of Yibum. And like every Masechta, it's the job of Mishnayos to understand the psukim, and it's the job of Gemaras to understand the Mishnayos. So let's start with Sefer Dvarim, Perek Kaf Hey, psukim Hey through Yud. 5 psukim in Chumash, and in turn 120 blot for a Masechta. So let's get started. Amir pittance. The pasuk says in Chumash, Ki yeshu achim yachdav, when brothers are together, umeis achad mehem, and one of the brothers dies, uvein ein lo, he doesn't have a son, lo sihya eshes hameis achutza leish zar, the woman who was married to the man who died should not be sent out to a strange man, Yevama yavo aleha, Yevama with a mapik hey, her yavam, meaning the other brother who's still alive should take her, ulekacha lo leisha v'yibma, and he should marry her and take her to be his wife, v'yibma, the verb of yibum, to marry her in that way, through yibum. The oldest child that will be born to this new marriage, the marriage of the Yavam and the Yevama, will be named after the person who died. His name will not be erased from the people of Israel. If the man doesn't want to take the Yevama, so the brother who's alive doesn't want to marry his brother who died, doesn't want to marry his wife, but also Yevimto Hashara El Hazakenim, she'd go to the gates to the elders, namely she'd go to Bezdin, Ve'amra, and she'd say, Me'en Yevami, my Yavam is refusing Lahakim La'achiv Shem B'Yisrael, to establish a name for his brother, Velo Ava Yabmi, and I can't make him want to marry me, doesn't want to marry me. So then the elders of the city call him to Bezdin, and they say to him, he stands and he says, I don't want to marry her. So then what happens? So then the Yevama shows up to the eyes of the elders in Bezdin, v'chalza na'alo, and she removes his shoe me'al raglo, from his foot, v'yarka befanav, and she spits in front of him, v'ansa v'amra, and seemingly she responds and she says, this is how they treat a man. This is what they do to a man who doesn't want to build a house in his brother's memory. V'nikra shemo b'Yisrael, and this person then earns for himself a nickname, which is Beis Chalutzanal. That's the nickname. He's the one whose shoe was taken off, a clear sign that he didn't want to take in his Yevama. So we're going to keep this piece of paper. There is a little chart on the bottom, which I'll hold up for those of you on Zoom when the time comes. And that is background number 1. Background number 2 is Hashem should bless me to be as clear as possible. Today is not hard, but we have to understand some of the basic yesodos that do come up in the Masechta. I will make every effort to be clear. If something's not clear, please feel free to call me out and I will do my best to clarify. Let's get started. The Mishnah writes on the top of Daf Beis Amud Aleph, Chamesh Esrei Nashim Potros Tzarosehin V'Tzaros Tzarosei Mina Chalitza Mina Yibum Ad Sofa Olam. There are 15 women who cause an exemption for the second wife. We'll discuss this in a moment, and for all the subsequent wives from Chalitza and from Yibum. Namely, this Parsha and Chumash that we just learned doesn't apply to a particular case, Umin Hayibum Ad Sofa Olam, forever. So what are we talking about over here? So take a look at the chart. So as you can see here, the chart here, I wrote a little small for you guys. The chart here says as follows. There's a mom and a dad, and the mom and the dad have 2 children. They have Ruvain and Shimon. Shimon marries a woman named Tamar, and they have a child named Chana. Now, Shimon's brother Ruvain married Chana as wife number 1 and married Penina as wife number 2. When a person is married to more than one wife, the other wife is referred to as a tzara. That's how the Torah that's how Tanakh refers to Chana and Penina. That's why these names have been chosen accordingly. So Chana and Penina are both married to the same man, Ruvain. Ruvain's married to his niece Shimon's daughter. Now, if Ruvain dies, what happens with the mitzvah of Yibum? If Ruvain dies, in theory, Shimon is supposed to marry Ruvain's wife, but there's a problem, which is that it's his daughter. So normally when it comes to the mitzvah of Yibum, we're as it is overriding a standard rule, which is that you cannot be intimate with your sister-in-law. However, the Torah does require for Yibum to take place, but it doesn't allow for it to take place when there's a secondary erva going on, and that is, in this case, that Chana is Shimon's daughter. So therefore, if you look under the name Chana, it says that there's no Yibum since Chana is Shimon's daughter. We'll see that if it could be Shimon's daughter, could be Shimon's mother, it could be Shimon's whatever. There's 15 of them in the Mishnah, but that's where the number 15 comes from. We'll get back to this in a second. Chana could be a daughter or one of any other 14 roles. So rule number one is that Yibum doesn't apply when the person that Shimon is supposed to marry is a direct relative of Shimon. Another rule is that if you look to the right side of the page, is that Penina also is not subject to the rules of Yibum. Why is she exempt? Because she is the tzara, she is the other wife of Chana. And since Chana is exempt from Yibum, by definition, Penina is exempt from Yibum. So therefore, Penina cannot get married to Shimon, even though she's not related to him at all. So that's a brief summary of a couple of nekudas, a couple of points about Yibum, is that yes, absolutely, the brother is supposed to marry his brother's sister. So Shimon is supposed to marry Reuven's widow. That's what he's supposed to do, but it's his daughter. And it's not just daughter. That's what the Mishnah says. There's 15 types of women that if they were Shimon's immediate relatives, he wouldn't be able to marry them. Ve'eluhain. Here are the people that had they been related to Shimon in one of the following 15 ways, Yibum would not apply, even though it's his brother's wife. Number one, Bito, his daughter. That was the case we just described. Ubas Bito, Ubas Beno, granddaughters, either Shimon's daughter's daughter or Shimon's son's daughter. Both of those cases, if Shimon's brother Reuven was married to Shimon's granddaughter and then Reuven died, Shimon cannot marry his granddaughter, of course not. Bas Ishto, what about if it's Shimon's wife's daughter, right? So Shimon's married to Tamar, that was the example here. So the halacha is that even there, that's not allowed. Ubas Bena, even the granddaughter of one's wife, they're not his kids, they're kids that came in through marriage. Ubas Bita, and the granddaughter through the wife's side as well. Chamoso, his mother-in-law. The aim Chamoso, his wife's, his mother-in-law's mother. The aim Chama, the mother of his father-in-law. Achoso me'imo, his sister from his mother's side. And the achos imo, and the sister of his mother, the achos ishto, and the sister of his wife, his sister-in-law. All of these women, had they been married to Reuven, Shimon has no requirement for Yibum because they're all erva to him. They're all related to him. The list goes on for a little bit more. The Eishes, this is a little subtle, the Eishes achiv me'imo, the wife of his brother through his mother's side, meaning it's his half brother's wife as well, even though it's pretty indirect. Still, the Mishnah says that if this person is the one who was married to Reuven, then Yibum doesn't apply if Reuven were to then die. We finished our first Amud. We're on Beis and Beis. The Eishes achiv shelo haya be'olamo, and as well the wife of the brother that's not yet born. So let's say that Reuven is married to Chana, and Reuven dies. And then Levi is born, grows up, and gets married. So how does that work? So then, even if that was the woman who we were talking about, it doesn't matter. You're not allowed to do Yibum there. And the last one is Bekala, so his daughter-in-law. Hare Elu. All 15 of these cases, and if we look back at this sheet, for those of you who didn't get, we still have a couple. I'll just do that. Here you go. For those of you who have the sheet with you, what you're going to be looking at is like this. There you go. We're looking at, again, these 15 people are the Chana. We said in our case that if Shimon's daughter was Chana, that there's no din of Yibum because even if Reuven dies, Shimon can't marry his own daughter. So just plug in where it says Chana, that it seems it's his daughter, plug in all 15 names here. There is this spoke of different type of relationships that Shimon could have. And if it's his daughter, if it's his granddaughter, if it's his grandmother, his mother, his mother's sister, and all the 15 that are listed, that's what we're talking about in our Mishnah. Those are the 15 types of arayos that had it been that one of those 15 types of arayos, they're only arayos to Shimon. They're not arayos to Reuven. It's unrelated to Reuven. Reuven was allowed to marry this person lechatchila. So that's what's going on in the Mishnah. Section 1 of the Mishnah is now complete, and their Peturos Tsaros Sehen. Not only are they exempt, not only is Penina exempt, even though Penina is not related to Shimon, but also Tsaros Tsaros Sehen, even future derivatives of wives that will be married, as we will soon see in the Mishnah. This is not yet clear. They will be exempt. Mina chalitza umina yibum ad sof ha'olam. We'll get back to this in a little bit.
Why is Penina exempt?
That is a huge machlokas in the Rishonim as to what the mechanics are that say that just because she's the second wife to Chana, so therefore she's exempt. So the Rishonim, you could write full svarim on that. That is a very sophisticated. It's a perfect question. I should have referenced it before you asked it. I'm glad you asked it. It's a spot-on question. There's a big tumult in the Rishonim. Is it that there is some kind of connect? There's like a whole bunch of theories that the Rishonim discuss. So that's a big discussion. Good. Line 3, Beis and Beis. V'chulan, in all cases, Imeso o mianu o nisgarsho o shenimtsu ilonios, if the woman who would have been this woman, the wife of, let's say, Reuven in our case, if she had passed away before the husband did, or if there was miyun. Miyun is when there is a marriage that is only a marriage derabanan, which applies when a girl is under the age of 12. So then she doesn't need to get, if she wants to get a divorce, she just says goodbye and walks away. There's no halachic mechanism. That's called miyun. So if Chana dies, or if there's miyun, onis garshu, or they halachically get divorced beforehand, oshenimtsu ailonius, or we find out that she is infertile, she can't have children, a hysterectomy, whatever the details are, then Penina is subject to Yibum. Then Saros and Mutaros. Then we do have the Psukim and Chumash to fall back on. So that's different than the case that we drew over here. The case on the chart is where Reuven died before anybody else did. But if Chana is the bond between Reuven and Shimon. So Reuven married Chana, and Shimon is Chana's daughter. But if Chana dies, then Penina, who's completely unrelated, then the classical rules of Yibum apply as though Chana never existed. And then Shimon would be obligated to marry Reuven's wife, his widow, who is, in this case, Penina. So therefore, if this woman had one of these many things happen, divorce, death, miyun, whatever it is, then the halachos of Yibum kick in as it relates to Penina, the second wife, who really is unrelated from everybody. Next, Ketzad Potros Tsarosehen. How does it work in regards to exempting a tzara from the mitzvah of Yibum? So here's the case.
What happened
That's my Vlad. That's I got my guy. In this Masechta, you're going to find me skipping lines as repeatedly as possible. So just stay put. Stay put.
You just end up going to the crazier case.
I don't know. I did skip the easier case, actually. This line's not hard. I'm glad you're here as always. You cannot say, as it relates to the mother-in-law or the mother of the mother-in-law, the mother of the father-in-law, what does this line of the Mishnah even mean? Of course they have children. It's your in-laws. You have a wife that you're married to. She obviously had children. So very interesting line of the Gemara, and of the Mishnah. We're not going to focus in on that now. So 5-6 lines down. Ketzad potros tsarosein. How do we have the tsaros, the peninas of the world, the second wives who really aren't halachically related, other than the fact that they're the second wife? So how does that work? So haisabito o achas mikol arayos elu nesuas le'echab. So this is what we said, one of the 15 types of erva that Reuven is married to, and the woman that he's married to happens to be an erva to Shimon, velo isha acheres, and he has another wife as well, umeis, and then he dies. Kishem shebito ptura kach tzarasa ptura. This is, we've already explained this idea, but the Mishnah is overly articulating this idea. And halcha. So, and this is where the added nuance that we needed from before, but we're going to add it in here now. Halcha tsaras bito v'nises le'echav hasheni. Then the tsaras bito is the second wife to the daughter. So Chana's tzara, who is Penina, v'nises le'echav hasheni, and she marries another brother. V'lo isha acheres, and that other brother has another velo isha acheres, and that and that husband has another wife, umeis, and then he dies. Kishem shetzaras bito ptura, just like Penina was already exempt from the world of Yibum because she was initially Chana's second wife. Well, now she's not Chana's second wife. She's Malka's second wife to a different man. Doesn't matter. The fact that she was once exempt from Yibum means that any wife that she shares a husband with will always be exempt from Yibum. Kach tzaras ptura afilu hein mea. And even if it keeps getting further and further removed, we don't care. There's no upper limit. Anytime a woman is exempt from Yibum and then she leaves that scenario and enters into a new marriage, if there's another wife in that scenario and the husband dies, there is no Yibum in that case. And to your question, Rob, it's not clear from the Mishnah itself as to why that's true, but it is definitely true. Ketzad imesu tsarosein mutaros. How does it work out that if the tsarosehen died, imesu, if they died, then tsarosein mutaros? So then says the Mishnah as follows: halfway down on Beis Mid Beis, we're going to wrap up actually halfway down to Gimel Amud Aleph. It's all one relatively quick sugya once we get out of the Mishnah. So then the Mishnah answers this case as follows. Same case as before. So Reuven is married to a woman, and any woman that could have been his wife was also an erva to his brother Shimon. Below Isha Acheres, and he has another wife. Mesa Bito Onis Garsha. We've already learned this idea before, but it's being repeated in the Mishnah. If Mesa Bito Onis Garsha, that if the daughter of Shimon, who's Reuven's wife died, or there's a divorce, and then after that, then sarasa muteras. Then the halacha is that the tzara is allowed to is subject to the halachos of yibum, and then he would have to then either do yibum or chalitza. Good. And then we're at the last end of the Mishnah. Yeah, the last end of the Mishnah says as follows: V'chol hayichola lema'in below miana tzarasa. We're not going to deal with this din now because it's about miyun. It's not. We'll get to this at another point. But basically, the short version of this is that it's someone who could have done miyun but did not. Then, as it relates to the tzara, she only can do chalitza, not yibum. We'll learn about this down the road. Let's start the beginning of the Gemara. The Gemara is bothered not by any of the sophisticated family trees that we're talking about here. And honestly, relative to the rest of the Masechta, it's not so sophisticated. But here, what the Gemara is bothered by is the order in which the 15 ervas are listed in our Mishnah. We might have thought it was arbitrary. We'll see by the end of the Gemara today, it was extremely particular as to how each of the 15 were listed. So if you glance back, it started out with Bito, his daughter, and then he went to the granddaughter through his daughter, the granddaughter through his son, and then he moves over to the wife's side of the family, Bas Ishto, his wife's daughter from an old marriage, and goes through the whole list. This list is very particular, and we're going to go through it. So says the Gemara Michti, let's analyze this Mishnah in regards to the order of the 15 ervas that are listed. Kulhu me'achos isha yalfinan. We will see soon that the pasuk not today, but the pasuk references specifically achos isha in regards to yibum, in regards to a type of erva that ruins yibum. That's learned out from the pasuk that speaks about achos isha. So says the Gemara, if that's true, then listni achos isha beresha. If that's what the pasuk in Chumash says, talking about achos isha, then okay, let's have that be item number 1 on the list of the 15 women, where if they happen to be married to Reuven, that Shimon cannot do yibum. Make it the first one, the one that's most obvious, the one that's mefurish in the pasuk. And if you want to say a different argument, no, it wasn't because of the pasuk. The reason why the order is the way it is because Tana, the author of our Mishnah, was teaching chumrei naka, teaching the most strict, and then going down in severity of consequence. Well, maybe then we would say Reb Shimon he to Amar Sreifa Chamura, and then Sreifa is one of the worst consequences. We should start with that. Well, Ihachi, if it really is a pecking order of ervas of the worst caliber to the best caliber, or to the least bad caliber, we shouldn't have started with achos isha anyways. What should we have started with? Ihachi lisni chamosa beresha. It should be that he starts with his mother-in-law. Why? To ikar sreifa b'chamosa ksiva, because the actual isser, the actual onesh of sreifa was first taught by a mother-in-law, and that shows us that it's the most severe of all of the ervas. If that's true, and if our Mishnah's order of the ervas should be listed specifically based on severity of consequence, we should have started with achosa. Why did we start with bito? So you can't even argue that it's because of the consequences of severity to the most severe to the most light. The Odin, furthermore, even if you want to say that it's in the order of the most severe, fine, but then basar chamoso, listening kalaso, then after the chamos, after the mother-in-law, you should have listed the daughter-in-law. The basar sreifa is skila, which is chamura. And that would be the consequence of a man being intimate with his daughter-in-law, is that it's a consequence of Sreifa. So then why is Kalaso the last one? Look at the top of the page on the top line. The Kalaso was the last one. For sure, our Mishnah cannot be speaking about the order of those who are erva in the order of greatest of consequence to the least of consequence, because literally the last one should have been number 2. And the one that speaks about Chamoso, his mother-in-law, should have been number 1, and it wasn't. So the Gemara says, you're right. And it gives its first positive answer as to why the order of the Chamesh Esrei ervas in our Mishnah are listed as they are. Really, says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom on Beis Mud Beis, Elabito, because Bito, the daughter, when the daughter that Ruvain married was his brother's daughter. So when Ruvain married Chana, and that Chana was Shimon's daughter, when that we learned out from a drasha. It wasn't explicit, and drashas are beautiful. Okay, so then says the Gemara on the top of the page, Kulu Nabi Midrashasu. It's not like all 15 ervas are listed in Dvarim Kaf Hey that we just learned. So the Gemara is bothered. Like, if you're going to tell me that it's how beautiful a drasha, they're all from a drasha except for Achos Ishto. So why would you then put it in the wrong order? You put this one first, Bito is first because it's Chaviv. All of them but one are Chaviv. Then still, why Bito? And the Gemara says, okay, but I could distinguish Bito from the others because the drasha about Bito was very unique. And maybe the modality in which Bito was learned was special. How so? Says the Gemara, you're right. Nihi, you're correct. Granted, Dil Inyan Yibum Asyan Midrasha. We do learn out most of the halachos of who the ervas are and who is going to ruin Yibum. We learn that out from a drasha. You're absolutely correct. However, Ikar Isuraihu behedjaksibehu, but the primary isur is what we just learned in Chumash, which is Dvarim Kafhe. But Bito, when it comes to his daughter, Ikar Isura Midrasha, there the entire concept of the daughter of Shimon making him ineligible to do Yibum is nowhere to be found in Chumash. It's only from a drasha. The Ikar Isser of Shimon marrying his daughter in Yibum is found only through drasha. What was the drasha? To Amar Rava, Amar Li Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, Asya Heina Heina, Asya Zima Zima, a double drasha from which we learned that Bito, that his daughter, invalidates the ability for him to do Yibum. So therefore, maybe there's something special about that drasha, and that's why Bito should be first. Says the Gemara, okay. Now that we're going with this suggested answer that maybe there's something unique about this drasha, if you're saying that all of the drashas are so beautiful, then good. List 14 drashos and then list the one thing that's mufurash in pasuk. What is that? Achos ishto. Manavshach, you're wrong. It can't be that that's the svara. If you're saying that all the drashas are coming first, why isn't Achos Ishto last? Why is Kala last? That's a drasha. So it can't be. It can't. So says the Gemara, well, maybe we can. Maybe, yeah, really the drashas are the key. But once we were talking about sisters, so you're right that Achos Ishto is in pasuk, but still, let's just put all the sisters together in one group. Okay. Well, if that's true, then Velisnia Lahai Baba Livasov. But then just put the other sisters next to the drasha of Achos Isha, which is the 15th. Why did you put it earlier? If the drashas are the ones that are so chashuv, leave the pasuk at number 15, move all of the sisters in the list toward the end of the list. Make them 12, 13, and 14, right next to Achos Ishto. And because of that, the Gemara says, you're right. And we have to pivot yet again. Why is the order of the 15 arayos in our Mishnah the way that it is? Says the Gemara 8 lines down, Elatana kurve nakat. Really what's happening is we have concentric rings of relationships going out in extending order. You have a person in the middle. That person in our case is Shimon. Then there's an immediate ring around him. Tana Bito, Uvas Bino. We have his daughter. We have his granddaughter through his daughter and his granddaughter through his son. The Kruve Atzmo. That's Mamish family. That's bloodline of that father. Those are his immediate children descending downward, his daughter and granddaughters. And then because we learned the 3 under him, the daughter and the 2 granddaughters that are under him, we also looked at Shimon's wife. What do we call her? Tamar. We looked at Tamar on our sheet and said, who are her granddaughters? Who's her daughter and granddaughter? We listed them next in the Mishnah. So then we learned her, Tana Shlosha Doros Lamala Dida. And then we go back to Shimon again, and we talk about sisters. The Tana achoso, the achos imo, the krove atzmo. We go back to the husband and say, well, we spoke about the 3 generations underneath Shimon. Then we moved over to speak about the 3 generations underneath Tamar. Then we go back to Shimon and focus on all the sister relatives. The Aidi Da'ari Be'isr Achva, Tana achos ishto. And because at that point we were talking about sisters, we also added in the sister of his wife. Ubedin, who really it should have been delictum alakalaso mekame eshes achiv shelohaya be'olamo. The last 2, numbers 14 and 15, it really should have been that the kala came before Eshes Achiv Shelohaya Be'olamo, the brother that was never born. It should be that way. Delo mishum kurva hu de'isura. It's not because of kurva that he is going to be aser. Ela aidi de'ari be'isur achva, because we were dealing with the isur of a sibling. So Tana Eshes Achiv Shelohaya Be'olamo v'hadar Tana kalaso. Then we taught that the brother who is not yet born, his wife is going to be problematic because we were already talking about siblings. And then the last one is going to be the daughter. This explains beautifully what's going on in the Mishnah. Oh, you thought about consequences? Can't be consequences. You thought that maybe it's about drushes? Can't be about drushes because that's out of whack. The whole thing is out of order. So Kaftor V'Ferach, the Gemara explains beautifully that the order of the Mishnah is specifically built in a hyper-structured set of concentric rings. The husband's immediate family, Shimon, and then Tamar, his wife's immediate family, back to the husband's siblings, and then so forth and so on. Very, very scheduled and calculated out. We're going to stop right here. Tomorrow night is Thursday. We're going to learn a blot and a half of Yirtzeh Hashem. Hashem should bless us all. And we're going to get to the bottom of Daf Daled Amud Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.